Hi, I'm William Malik with your bit of security for August 29th, 2024. Happy Skynet Day for all who celebrate. Today we're going to be taking a look at testing requirements. I spoke recently about software testing, and I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into one aspect of it, and that is how you go about constructing your software test plan. In 1979, Phil Crosby wrote a book called Quality is Free. His explanation was to say that quality is merely conformance to requirements. And what that means for a tester is that the quality of your test, the adequacy of your test, is entirely dependent on the comprehensiveness and thoroughness of the design and requirements documents you're working from. Quality is not an expedition into the unknown. It very much depends on what it is that the designers and developers and architects have built. The software development process can be described as a motion through time that follows the path of the letter V. We start at a very high level on the top left with product requirements, and then through a process called stepwise refinement, we take it to a more formal expression. And finally, at the bottom center, we have the code itself. Now, on the right-hand side, we go through a series of escalatingly more complex tests. And the reason it's designed like a V is to point out that whatever happens on the branch at a particular level on the left side, as you're in the design development process, should be reflected and validated by the testing activity that happens at the corresponding piece on the right-hand side. So you get down to code, and what's the lowest level of testing for code? Well, it's unit tests. That's where you just make sure that your loop conditions are correct and so on. Now, from a security perspective, the kinds of things you look at in unit tests are things like, do I have any hard-coded passwords? Do I have any links? Do I have any pieces of code that were there for test and analysis purposes that we don't want to go into production? The number of times that defects have been exposed and used by bad actors because somebody left a hard-coded password in place or left a link in place, too much to talk. So as you go down the stepwise refinement thing and get to the code, you climb up on the reverse side, the other leg of the V, reaching up towards the final test, which is to say, does the product adequately reflect the original intent, requirements, and specifications? Now, this may sound like waterfall, but it isn't really waterfall. Waterfall was originally actually quite fluid. Uh, there was a good deal of feedback. Designers would get back in touch with architects, developers would provide feedback to designers, and the code walkthrough phase, which began long before there was any code actually in place, included design, architect development, and test people to make sure that we had a complete understanding. This not only has direction, but it has feedback. As a result, you understand that the product performs as it's intended at every step of the way. Now, the adequacy of the code depends on the intelligence of the requirements, and the process of writing is very hard, which is why the steps take very different levels of time and effort. The ratio we experienced when I was doing development at IBM in Poughkeepsie was 8 to 4 to 1 to 2. Let me expand that. In a 15-month project, the first 8 months consisted of high-level design. That's where you talk about it in English. The next 4 months were used a formal language, still no code. So you've got a 15-month project, and at the end of the first year, the boss says, how are we doing? And we go, great, we're going to start coding next month. Boss says, good, everything's on track. It's very important to get this point. If the boss expects that the first third of the code will be done at the 5-month point on a 15-month project, there are 2 things I can guarantee. The first thing I can guarantee is the code is going to be rife with bugs. And the second thing I can guarantee is it's going to be at least 6 to 9 months late. Because people solve the problem they understand first and they put off the hard stuff for later, which means the first half of the project takes the first half of the time, and the remaining half of the project takes 3 times as much time. When an organization ships code that has defects that should have been caught by adequate testing, it means only one of two things. Either the product requirements and specifications were inadequate, and the organization shut off feedback in order to preserve some mythical belief in the success of a schedule met. The other thing is that the organization, under schedule pressure, decided to eliminate a test phase in order to catch up. The cost of this is immeasurably bad. Think of the recent software defects that slipped out to the world and the havoc they caused. And think about also the fact that when you start with a set of requirements and move down towards code, you also have the opportunity from those requirements to move up towards your product positioning, towards your market sizing, towards your revenue expectations. These also can be tested. So when you go through the specification process, I want you to include two things. I want you to include the functional requirements, that is, what is the code supposed to do? And I want you to include the non-functional requirements. How are you going to fix it? How are you going to debug it? How are you going to tune it? How are you going to make sure it's performing adequately? And how will you know that it is protecting the privacy and security and trustworthiness of the individuals using it? That's our bit of security for August 29th. I'm William Malik. Be safe.